In the wake of Rob Reiner's tragic passing, potential murder at the hands of a family member, a lot of people talked about his body of work, but there's one unmentioned hit production that they're leaving out. I'm Jim Babka. This is a segment we call Instant Grace, a shorter version of Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Rob Reiner is most remembered for iconic films that define genres in some cases. There's the beloved fantasy comedy called The Princess Bride, and there's the groundbreaking romantic comedy When Harry Met Sally. There's the hilarious mockumentary of This Is Spinal Tap, and there's the poignant coming-of-age drama called Stand By Me, and the thrilling Stephen King adaptation of Misery, and the powerful courtroom drama of A Few Good Men. And these not only showcased his versatility across comedy, fantasy, and drama, but they leave Rob Reiner, and people are realizing this in the wake of his passing, as one of the greatest directors of all time. He had a period where he literally was just at the very top of the game. There's also, by the way, other films that you like. I happen to be a fan of The Bucket List. That was him. The American President, which I think it ended up spawning a TV show. But they're overlooking one production that actually did very, very well late in his life. And it wasn't in the realm of film, but it was right up my alley. And I eagerly consumed all 10 episodes of it as they were released. It was a podcast. It was called Who Killed JFK? Now, Apple Podcasts rated, the ranking right now is 4.6 out of 5 stars with over 7,300 ratings. Spotify has it at 4.6 out of 5 stars with over 2,100 ratings. It was a major winner at the 2024 Signal Awards, which is kind of the Academy Awards, if you will, of the podcasting industry. It was a top finalist nominee for Podcast of the Year at the 2025 iHeart Podcast Awards. It was iHeart that put out Who Killed JFK, although it was available on other platforms as well at the time. But the one that had kind of the primary release and who had the stamped label and branding on it was indeed iHeart. The series itself reached number 1 on the Apple Podcast charts shortly after its release. And Dick Russell, who wrote On the Trail of the JFK Assassins, claims that they had over 20 million listeners to the show. It's referenced, for us, we referenced it at Gracearchy in a list of resources that we presented in episode 119 called Trump's JFK Executive Order Contents and Concerns. That's episode 119. We'll put the link down in the show notes. That episode, by the way, is part of a conspiracy playlist that includes episodes. We've done 3, I believe, so far on the JFK assassination. And we've shared a lot of information with you, not to try to posit any specific theory or put forward any specific hypothesis, save for the fact that the Warren Commission version of that story was not true. Rob Reiner brought a special talent to the presentation of Who Killed JFK. First, he had access. He was connected. He had friends with names like Clinton, Obama, and former CIA Director John Brennan, who offered to help him gain access to CIA information and experts on the subject. Now, I would have been a little bit wary about that, but there's no sign that the episodes are the worse for wear for these relationships. Russell himself, Dick Russell, also wrote a book, and along with JFK and the Unspeakable by James W. Douglas, this book by Russell, On the Trail of the JFK Assassinations, along with his work on Richard Nagel, formed kind of the basis of the show. So Soledad O'Brien was kind of like the representative of the audience. She's a well-known media figure, worked at CNN, for example, and she is kind of narrating or telling the show from her vantage point. She's learning from first Rob Reiner, and as more and more as the episodes go on, from Dick Russell, who's one of the very top JFK researchers, one of the best out there. And they kind of walk through the strange things about this case, things that a lot of people don't know. And we ranked it as the 4th most important intro resource. But if you just like to listen, I think it's the top podcast we have listed in the list. So if you want to tune into it, I would highly recommend it. It's available on iHeart and other podcasting platforms. Who Killed JFK? One of the things they did that's really super interesting is that they name the 4 assassins. They believe there's 4. They do this right in the final episode. It's the perfect place to put it. Rob had a flair for production, and he makes sure that this is told in a story in a way that makes sense. It's very, very easy to follow along. His production skill was definitely exhibited there, and he closes on a note where he has he ended up doing a bonus episode that came up while they were in release of this series that he added on at the end. But his planned ending was to tell you who he thought was involved in the conspiracy. And I'll just give you quickly the names that he listed as being involved. The assassins, or the potential assassins, that's how they labeled them, were Herminio Diaz Garcia, a Cuban exile mob figure and skilled marksman. And there were 3 others that they named. John Sutra, a French assassin who may have been involved in an assassination attempt on Charles de Gaulle. Charles Nicoletti, a Chicago mob associate and hitman for CMG Ancona. And Jack Cannon, a CIA operative. Those are the names that they gave as potential assassins. And then they also listed a couple of rogue individuals, strategists, as it were, from the CIA or the military that helped out. They potentially mentioned Bill Harvey, a CIA official, whom new information is coming out even this year as a result of the release of the files that happened earlier this year that we've talked about. And Charles Willoughby, a former major general in the U.S. Army who was involved in the ultra-right and anti-communist groups. So it ended with a flare. And it's an episode series that I would recommend. And it wasn't getting talked about as part of the successful career that Rob Reiner had behind the camera, or in production, more precisely. So I'd encourage you to check it out. Thank you.